Well, I want to welcome you to the video. This is going to be for stock options and earnings per share, hopefully. And we're just going to go jump right into it for the stock options. And what we have here, stock options are given to certain employees, basically the key executives that you want to make sure they stick around for a while. And stock options are ones that they need to work for a while before they actually can exercise the options. You don't want to just have them start options right away, so you want to make sure they're going to stick around first. Okay, so on this one, what we have is January 1st, 2013, a company granted 100,000 shares of $1 par common stock within the next 8 years, starting 12/31 of 16. Exercise price is the current price of $35 per share. The fair value of the option is estimated to be $8 per share, but that will be given to you for right now. And if the employee leaves, the option is voided. In other words, you have to be there for the 4 years. So you see they have an 8-year time period, but they have to wait 4 years before they can start exercising the options. Okay, that's to get them in there. So January 1st, there is no entry when you grant the options. However, we do need to figure out the compensation expense. So what we have here is, forgot my glasses, $8. Oops, I'm up one too high. $8. Options granted is 100,000. So that means that we take $8 times 100,000 to get $800,000. Okay, that's our total compensation expense. Now, one of the options is you take that compensation expense and you amortize it over the vesting period, which is the period that they can't exercise it, which in this case was the 4 years. So we would take the 800,000 and divide that by 4, and that gives us then 200,000 per year. Okay, so that's our compensation expense, and that's what simply goes in here. So you debit compensation expense, and you would credit paid-in capital from compensation expense. And that entry you're going to make for the next 4 years. That same entry, 200,000. Okay, when they start exercising the options, okay, we're not going to do it each time. We're just going to say at the end of the period they exercised half of the options. So the cash actually paid in, I want to do it this way first. The cash actually paid in would be the 100,000 shares of options divided by 2, because we said it was times a half, times $35. Not put 35 there. Okay, so over here you'd have the 100,000 divided by 2 times 35, or 1,750,000. Okay, for the paid-in capital for stock options, that's this one right here. Now that's up to 800,000 now. So we would take the 800,000 and we exercised half of it. So that's what we would take in there. So this would be equal to 800,000 divided by 2. Or 400,000. The common stock, well, we had options for 100,000 shares, and we said they exercised half of them, and they were $1 par value. Remember, you always record common stock at par value. So it's equal to 100,000 divided by 2 times the $1 par value is 50,000. And this one you add is what makes a balance. So you add those two together, subtract the 50,000, and that gives you 2,100,000. Okay. If the rest of them are exercised, then you go through that same process again. But we're going to assume that they're expired to show you what to do with it. Well, you had 800,000 and divided by 2. Okay. So we transfer it from the stock paid-in capital for stock options to paid-in capital expired stock options. So it's not too exciting there. But that's how you do stock options. Okay, the next section is earnings per share. Now, earnings per share, if it's a simple capital structure, you just do a weighted average, and that's what we're going to do to begin with. This first one right here, this example, is a simple capital structure. All that means is that you have common stock, and you have non-convertible preferred, no stock warrants, no convertible bonds, nothing that converts into common stock. So you just have common stock with nothing exciting about it. So we start with 20,000 shares. 20,000 shares. Now dividends, it doesn't matter when you declare the dividend is handled. You go back and you say, okay, you have to adjust for it at the very beginning of the year. And if it's 2 years, you actually go back 2 years and adjust for the dividends. Even though the dividends may be declared at the end of the second year or toward the end of the second year, you handle it as if it happened at the very beginning of that first year. So if it's multiple years you're doing, go back the 2 years. Okay. Now, this is also be clear, this is stock dividends, not cash dividends. So we're going to have stock dividends of 1.1, which we put in there. And it was for 3/12 of the year. So we would multiply all these together. This one times this times that. And we don't want any decimal places, so I just put times 0. Okay. April 1st, we sold 5,000. If you sell them, that increases the number of shares because you're the one sold the stock, so the number of shares issued is what we have out there. We still have the dividend out there, and this was for 6/12 of the year. So this is one that you just keep on multiplying. Okay. Dividend took place, so that gives us an additional 2,500 shares, sorry, because it's 10%. I did a simple one, and I couldn't cut it out. So you just take the 2,500 times 1.1, and that gives you 2,750. I'm going to put a 1 in there to keep my consistency. You don't need to, but I'm just going to do that, make life simpler for me. And that gives me 2/12 of the year. So what I do is just copy that down, if I can. There we go, 4583. Okay. Normally you wouldn't have the 1 in there. You just take the 27,500 times the 1/6. Now on December 1st, we bought back 1,000 shares, so that's 26,500. Okay. Let's put the 1 in there so I can multiply it out, and that's for 1/12 of the year. And that way, so I can just copy this down. Without the 1, I can't copy it down. And that's not how I copy it down. I grabbed the wrong thing. There we go. And we just simply now do an auto sum. All right. So for the basic earnings per share, we would take the 130,205, which is our income, divided by the 26,041. So over here, we take that number divided by this one, and it gives you $5 a share. Okay. For the next example, we're going to do is a little more what they call a complex capital structure. We have preferred stock that can be converted into 3 shares of common stock. So which means it's also cumulative and convertible. So that means cumulative, you don't declare dividends, remember it accumulates to the next year, and you have dividends in arrears, which are still deducted. And convertible means I can take this preferred stock and convert it into preferred stock at a predetermined date that it may have on there, which has to be given to you. Okay, everything else is the same. We'll also have a 2-for-1 split here, so we also added that one. So we started with 20,000 shares. Now splits are handled just like dividends. Here's my dividend I had from up above. And now if I have a 2-for-1 split, again, you go back and as if it happened at the very beginning of what time period you're talking about. And that's still 3/12. And this is equal to, and I'm going to do the same thing on this one, equal round, multiply all these together. The 20,000 times the 1.1 times the 2 times the number of months that we had it out there, comma 0, and it gives you 11,000. Okay, April 1st, we sold 5,000, which gives you 25,000 times the 1.1 times the 2, and this is for 2/12 before we did something else. And what I can do now is copy that down. And then we had the stock split. So now we have 50,000 shares because you take the 25,000 times the 2. We still have the 1.1. I'm going to put a 1 there because we're not doing anything for my multiplying. And this is for 4/12 of the year. And we can simply copy that down. After an event happens, you take put a 1 in there if you want to. You leave it blank, just don't multiply if you use Excel. October 1st, we had the dividend. So now we have, I'll do it this way, equal the 50,000 shares times the 1.1 for my dividend. So it's 55,000 shares. So now that becomes a 1 because it's after the fact. And that was out there for 2/12 of the year. And we copy that down. That's what that will give you 91.67 for the weighted average. And then we bought back 1,000 shares, which gives you a 54,000. And that's a 1. That's going to be a 1. And that's for 1/12 of the year. And we simply copy that down. And this will give you then a weighted average of 52,167. And that's because we also had a stock split in there. Okay. We'll go over real quick how to do the dividends. So for the dividends, you would take the 10% times the par value of, I've got my dollar sign for you, $50 times the number of shares, which is 2,000 shares. Okay, so that would be equal to 10% times the 50 times the 2,000, which gives you 10,000 shares, or $10,000. So for the basic earnings per share, we would take the 130,205 minus the preferred dividends of 10,000. Remember, it's cumulative, so it doesn't matter whether it's been declared or not. And divide that by the number of shares of 52,167. So if you do that, we have equal 130,205 minus the 10,000 divided by 52,167. That gives you $2.304 as your dividends. Okay. Now here we have to recalculate the number of shares. It's real simple. We had 2,000 shares of preferred stock. We assume they have been converted. So that means we have an additional then 6,000 shares of common stock out there. Okay. For the diluted earnings per share then, what we would have would be the 130,205 divided by, we don't subtract off because we don't have preferred dividends anymore, but we divide it by the 52,167 plus the extra 6,000. And for your earnings per share then, I'll put it down here. I think I have something in there. Okay. Down here then we would have equal 130,205 divided by 52,167 plus 6,000. And that gives you $2 and per share. Okay. So that gives you $2.238 per share, and that is your dividends per share under that's your diluted earnings per share. So your basic is 230.4. Your diluted earnings per share would be 223.8 cents per share, $2.23.8 cents. Okay, that is your earnings per share, and I hope that helps. So we'll see what happens.